Part 130. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Wei Pang. Chapter 1305. Emperor Suanwu wanted to take her away from this palace, away from this chapel, and find a place with beautiful mountains and rivers to restart their new life. However, after listening to the conversation between the two men last night, the thought in my heart became to protect her. To get the supreme right, to protect her will never be bullied. Those who have insulted her, he wants them one by one, all broken up. To do this, he must first become the emperor and get back the rights that belong to the emperor. Emperor Suanwu said that if he did it, even if he wanted to accompany her reluctantly, he understood that he needed to do more. Yan Ji had already closed her eyes and realized that Emperor Suanwu was about to leave. She reached out and pulled his sleeve. She opened her eyes to the eyes of Emperor Suanwu, and stopped talking. "What's wrong?" Emperor Suanwu leaned down and rubbed his fingers forehead. "Are you still having a headache?" Yan Song shook his head and shook his head again. She looked at him and said softly, "Ajiu, I have no small births. I just lied to them and wanted them to die for you. You don't want to target them. We don't have many people now." "I know." Emperor Suanwu rubbed Yan Ji's forehead calmly. "Be assured, I won't touch them for the time being. But sooner or later, those who touched her would all want them to die." Yan Ji heard the words relieved, slightly raised his chin and smiled at him. "Ajiu is the best. When she was a child, she was always hanging on her mouth." At the moment, he heard that not only wasn't the slightest joy, but his heart was getting more and more heavy. Is she bragging about him because of those two men? During this time, she always ignored him, and the two were almost always arguing. From yesterday to today, she finally treated him better, reminding him of the days when the two were young. But he knew very well that she was so kind to him that he was afraid that he would strike the two men. He felt resentful in his heart, but he didn't show his face, watching her soft eyes drown. Waiting for Yan Ji to close his eyes again, he just got up, went out of the inner room silently, and asked several palace men waiting for her before leaving. Emperor Suanwu didn't have any ambitions, nor did he have the intention to be an emperor. He went to the battlefield to practice for so many years and wanted to be a general. Now Yin Che-yang became an emperor, not only to learn Confucianism, but also to learn the so-called emperor's art. The most abominable thing is that these ministers constrained him to rule his ancestors one by one, and they didn't show much respect to him as an emperor. Emperor Suanwu had no intention of being an emperor, but it did not mean that he was not bloody. It didn't matter before and was unwilling to fight, but now that he has a goal, he must first get these ministers up. Although there are conspiracies and conspiracies on the battlefield, but not so many twists and turns on the court, and Emperor Suanwu is young, he does not have so much patience, and not so much effort to play with these gangsters. Everyone who comes down on the battlefield likes to use a knife to do things. Emperor Suanwu came out of the Sinning Palace, and they asked him to go to the Parliament Hall, saying that the southwestern country was dry. Several ministers were discussing this matter in the Parliament Hall. When Emperor Suanwu passed, it was only after he was placed as a chihuahua at the table that the ministers discussed it before letting him stamp it. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Wei Pang. Chapter 1306. Yan Ji woke up not long before he was awakened by the Red Queen. Mother-in-law is not good, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, he killed Qin Shangshu." After stuttering, she felt that she was wrong, and quickly corrected, "It wasn't killing, it was because the head of Qin Shangshu was cut off, and it was in the Parliament Hall." Words of song. She froze. Oh. Hangya opened her mouth and saw that her mother-in-law was calm. For a time, she thought that her mother-in-law was planning something. This was because Emperor Xianwu had already passed the speech with Yanj in advance. So the words what to do at the exit were changed to mother-in-law, it's not good to be a slave, noisy you, do you still sleep for a while? Does your head hurt? It hurts, but it's just a faint pain. Yanj rubbed his eyebrows, why is Qin Shangshu's head cut? The host has managed the harem for several years. Because of this, the slaves in the former harem, even if there are others in the dark, are mostly the eyes and ears of the host. In the case of the former Korean Parliament Hall, as long as you want to know here, there is nothing you don't know. Sure enough, when she asked, Hung Ham immediately said, the drought in the southwest, because of how to deal with the disaster, several ministers quarreled with His Majesty. Shangfang Baoji uncut off Qin Shangshu's head, and asked if other ministers had any opinions on him as an emperor. Words of song. This is the true means of Emperor Suanwu. The words closed their eyes and the corners of their lips rose. Hung Ho looked at Yanj and couldn't figure it out for a moment. She didn't ask about the parliament. Until the evening meal, Emperor Suanwu finally came again. He wore a bright yellow uniform, although he was only 16 years old, but when he stepped on the door, he looked very vigorous and calm. This momentum and calmness he experienced from the battlefield. He clearly did not tell the meaning of the words in the House of Representatives. Immediately after entering the door, she smiled at Yanj, when did you wake up and still have a headache, why didn't you drink the medicine today? It's too bitter, Yanji frowned. It's so dark, I can't drink it when I look at it. Emperor Suanwu signaled the palace people to bring the medicine back, I feed you. Yan Ji's brow frowned suddenly, I'm not sick and don't want to drink. I'll give you maltose after drinking. Yan Ji glared at him for a moment and laughed, look at my age or the age of eating maltose. However, after all, I drank the medicine and ate sugar. The two had dinner and went for a walk in the garden together. Today Emperor Suanwu does not have a woman, and Yanj and Emperor Suanwu are crouching in the imperial garden. There is really no woman who will emerge. This kind of thing is probably too rare. Emperor Suanwu looked at the words several times, but there was something to say, but he didn't speak. Yan Ji knew that he was afraid that the relationship between the two would return to the freezing point. He was silent and his words were silent. The tingling sensation spread from deep in his head. In the beginning, the song was still tolerable, but gradually, the tingling sensation became denser and denser. Her face was sweating and she couldn't maintain her basic expression. Even if it was dark, Emperor Suanwu noticed the strangeness of the words, and immediately picked up the words, rushing to the temple of Sinning while letting people call the doctor. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1307. I'm okay. Yanj knew that this was just a sequelae of fusion, which was not harmful to the body, and even if the doctor arrived, he could not find out the cause. How can it be alright? Emperor Suanwu's voice was panicked, you are like this now, how can you call it alright? But immediately, he calmed down again and hugged Yanj to appease, don't be afraid, there is me, Yang Yang, you will be fine. The words are silent. Emperor Suanwu's obsession with the host is particularly deep. In fact, this task is relatively simple to calculate. As long as she breaks away with the messy men of the host and lives happily with Emperor Suanwu in this harem, it should be perfect. As for the matter on the court, without her help, the method of Emperor Suanwu, at most, was to take over the regime in a few years, which would not have much consequences. Therefore, she can actually decentralize her power through this headache and hand over that power to Suanwu Emperor. When they returned to Sinning Palace, the doctors were already waiting. One by one took the pulse for the words, looking at each other, all frowning and wondering why. Emperor Suanwu's eyes swept across their faces, and they immediately understood. Don't say that you can't find the cause one by one. The voice of Emperor Suanwu almost roared. But before he finished speaking, the weak voice of the Queen Mother-in-law in the bed account sounded, "What is the relationship with them? I have a headache when I do and sleep well. They, in the future, will be more afraid to talk more with me." Although her voice was weak, she was gentle and soft, and she did not play with the cruel Queen Mother-in-law. Emperor Suanwu heard her words, glanced gloomily at these doctors. "Get out." The doctors all hurried out. Until the entire inner room was gone, Emperor Suanwu walked to the bed a few steps, opened the curtain and lowered his head to see the words, "Yang Yang, tomorrow I will let people look for folk doctors. These doctors are a bunch of waste. Folk doctors will be more powerful. Don't be afraid, there will be ways." Yanj grabbed his hand, rubbing her forehead, and stuck it to his face. "Ajiu, I'll be fine." She paused and said, "I don't have a headache because of illness, but because I think too much." She looked at Emperor Suanwu in a puzzled manner and smiled, and continued, "I was always alone in the past few years, and I always thought about it a lot. I know my own body, I have nothing at all, and I will raise it for a while. Come on, Ajiu, don't you get upset because of this." Her voice was soft, although she spoke softly, looking at him with a bit of begging, but the firmness in the words did not allow him to resist. Emperor Suanwu pursed his lips, but eventually he could not help her, nodding reluctantly. Yanj happily hugged his arm and shook, "Ajiu is the best." In the evening, he still hurriedly urged the Emperor Suanwu, and Emperor Suanwu reluctantly left Sinning Palace. But when Yanj woke up in the middle of the night, the whole body was held in his arms by Emperor Suanwu. It's almost like being a personal pillow. When Yanju opened his eyes, his body froze. Because at this moment, not only was Xianwu Emperor lying tightly in her bed, and there was a man standing beside the bed. Xuecheng. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1308. The man was standing by the bed like a stone sculpture, his expression hidden in the shadows. Yan Ji could not see his expression clearly, but felt that his features were cold and ruthless. "Xuecheng, when did you come? How long have you stood in front of the bed? It's cold in the middle of the night, standing by the bed." Although the song was a little distressed. But there is no way to say that the sky is going to get warm. She felt that it was like a rollover. The rollover came too suddenly. Yan Ji didn't even know how to react at this moment. You can't kick Emperor Suanwu out of bed and hug Xuecheng and say that you don't know why the emperor is here. Obviously not a husband and wife, but at this moment, Yan Ji still had a kind of guilty feeling that his wife had secretly found out. Her eyes moved, and then she lowered her eyes, biting her lips slightly, looking like Ranjunze. For a long time, Xuecheng said, "Tomorrow will be closed, and there will be forces from all parties to the Xue family, and everyone will discuss what the emperor did by day." He said here, squinting his eyes and looking to the words, "Before noon tomorrow, my attitude depends on whether you can show up in Swifu." Yan Ji faced his dark eyes, his face was pale, and he was weak. My status, can't get out of this palace." Xuecheng raised her lips and sneered, "Can't, or are you unwilling?" After he had said this, he turned and left. "Yang Yang," I said, "I support him, but it is because of you." Realizing that he had spoken so much with Xuecheng, Emperor Xianwu still remained motionless. After speaking, he knew and felt afterwards, and Xuecheng probably did something to Emperor Xianwu. She hurriedly got up and got out of bed, a few steps to catch up with Xuecheng, and grabbed his sleeve. "I and him are not what you think." She didn't say this, but said that. Xuecheng's seemingly dark eyes rolled instantly. He squeezed his fingers tightly and released them, and when the expression on his face faded, he turned his head and stared at Yanj with a smile. Although not talking. But that look was like asking her back, "Who believes this?" Yanj held his sleeves tightly, the ground was wet and cold, and her bare feet were snorted by the coldness, and her tiptoes were busy. Aching, my identity now, if you go out to your palace and be known by those ministers, it will only be you who are implicated. She looked up at him carefully. Aching, tomorrow evening, I'll find a way to go to your house at night. Okay, you said you brewed plum wine and buried it in the yard, I always wanted to try it. Xueqing put his hand on Yanj's waist and hugged him directly. Yanj, this guy, wouldn't he want to slap her in front of Emperor Suanwu? What if Suanwu Emperor wakes up? In case, what to do when Emperor Suanwu wants to join? This, if this is another car, she really can't bear it. Unguarded, she was picked up horizontally, and Yan Ji grabbed Xueqing's clothes in a fright, and whispered Aching. She trembled at the bottom of her heart, still struggling, should she let Xueqing hold her outside? Xueqing didn't have the rhythm to think of the words, he held the words, walked to the bed a few steps, and put the words in. The disgusting glance squinted at Emperor Suanwu who was still asleep. He looked at the words, before noon tomorrow, don't come to Xue's house, and never see me again in the future. After he had said this, he strode away. That step was fast, as if I was afraid that Yanj would catch up with him and talk to him about the conditions. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1309. Yanj, the head hurts again. This Xueqing is obviously not a master who can be dumped by her. Alas, the life of N boats is so painful. Yan Ji lay back in bed worried. The fingers touched under Emperor Suanwu's nose, and the breath was smooth, and nothing serious happened. Her head was aching, and it was really uncomfortable. I thought I couldn't sleep anymore, but I fell asleep until dawn. When he woke up, there was no Suanwu Emperor around him as usual. What happened in the middle of last night was like a dream. But Yan Ji knew that it was not a dream. One of the two boats on her soul had overturned. It wasn't long before Emperor Suanwu got to the throne. Yesterday, something happened to cut the minister's head. At this moment, he had to fight against Xueqing. It was really a minute when he wanted to be pulled off the throne. At this moment, it's really not the time to capsize. Yan Ji thought about it and finally sighed. This Swafu seems to have to go. Anyway, there are more men sleeping in the host, it seems that it is not so bad. Otherwise, let's talk after sleep. I just don't know, can I straighten the overturned boat? What if Xueqing wants to sleep more? Emperor Suanwu obviously did not look like a person who would always wear a green hat. Because of this, the relationship between her and Emperor Suanwu is as low as the host's life. Since Xueqing called her to Xue's house, it seems that she also learned that her childbirth was fraudulent. The man's anger did not know if she could offset it with a single sensation. Yanj has a headache. After lying on the bed for a while, I asked the palace man to face the council before, and Emperor Suanwu stumped due to official duties, afraid that he would not be able to accompany her to eat at noon. She pretended to be a handsome little white face, and went out of the house with a red coat. It's a little early until noon, and it's not easy to go out of the palace. The book that Yanj gave to Emperor Suanwu said that he wanted to go to the street outside the palace and simply went to a more lively street. I bought some snacks and prepared to bring them to Xueqing, and I bought a peach-made transfer bead for Emperor Suanwu and put it in a sachet. I consider myself very intimate with this gift. This went to Swafu with great satisfaction. Although disguised, but in order to prevent people from recognizing it, Yan Ji and Hong Ye went to the back door of Swafu. Xueqing probably figured that Yanj would enter through the back door. Yanj waited for a moment at the door. Xueqing came to pick her up in person. It was very hot, and Yanj was standing in the gatehouse, holding a large flower fan bought in the street in the wind. As soon as he looked up at Xueqing who was striding forward, his eyes suddenly turned on, and he took a few steps out of the gate and trot toward Xueqing. Xueqing has never seen such a lively queen. He met her in the palace and slept in the palace. Most of the time, he saw that she was dressed in a heavy suit and lazily leaning on the bed to read a book. The coquettishness she wore like this today, and hurried towards him, became more vivid in the sun. He glanced slightly, staring at her as she approached. I don't know why, suddenly there is a kind. The beauty girl in the painting moves slowly, coming from the painting, with the illusion of the human atmosphere in front of him. Yan Ji stepped in front of him and reached out. Xueqing's heart was still rippling, she raised her hand and shook her hand. Yan rushed to the back of his hand with a slap and said, "Is there any money? After asking you a few words, why don't you answer? Many hawkers outside wait for me to give them money. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After my death, the villain blackened again." Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1310. Xueqing. Yan Ji met his doubtful gaze, and fanned him with a large fan. "This fan, 2 copper plates, and a wooden ladle on my head, 3 copper plates, I have no silver." Xueqing then reacted. He had no money on himself. Fortunately, the concierge is not worse than this, and helped the boss of his own house. After settling the bill, Yan Ji picked up the pile of snacks that he bought for Xueqing and handed it to Xueqing, who was going to continue to hold her hand. "These are all delicious for you." Yan Ji pointed to those foods carried in Xueqing's hand. "I bought them specifically for you in the street." She raised her chin and said proudly, "Every time you go to the palace, you do nt bring me a delicious one. Look at me. The first time I see you, I have brought you so much delicious food." Yanj wore a bright red noble suit, covered with a thin purple gauze. Originally a beautiful woman with red lips and white teeth, wearing such immense clothing, like which little boy, King Guihunkai, arrogant and arrogant. Xueqing dumped all the food on one hand, clasped her waist with the other hand, bowed her head, and kissed her lips. Words of song. Here comes the kiss that disrupted her steps. Probably from a young age, Xueqing's kiss was particularly overbearing, and the wind swept through the mouth of Yanj like a torrential rain. Then he let people go, and instead took Yanj's hand and went forward. Words of song. Don't you plan to say something? Does she keep talking? Or bow your head shyly? I thought I could buy his stomach with the pile of food I bought today, and let the sleep of 2 people become a meal. It now seems unlikely. Xueqing was taken a few steps by Xueqing and whispered, "Feet hurt, I can't move." Xueqing stunned, "Wait, let me lift the soft car." Words, you memorize. Xueqing turned her head silently and glanced at Yan Ji, then crouched down. Words, can you move your back? They all say that the family members are all beautiful men who don't seem to use it. They have no strength to kill chickens. I lie on your back, will you take me? Fall down. Xueqing heard the words, tick the corners of his lips, you can't use it? Try it later, come up. Yan Song, what did this man just say? It seems that for a while, it really is inevitable. The heart of the words was suddenly unsuccessful. She climbed onto Xueqing's back, and the fan in her hand helped the 2 wind. Don't you say that the ministers came to Xuefu today? Why did you pick me up in person? Xueqing, you are here, why are they here? That makes sense. This is not the first time to fool her to come to Xuefu. The voice of Yanj was faint, "Qing, I didn't ride in a carriage after I came out of the palace. I came all the way." Her hot breath was deliberately in his ear, and she continued to murmur, "Tired and tired. Feeling swollen feet. I've always wanted to check it out at the Shui house where you live. I didn't expect to have come here today, but my feet couldn't move. Qing, your back is really strong, Otherwise, you carry me around Xuefu. What can Xueqing say? What he wanted to say was already spoken. Therefore, they can only turn around Xuexue with a big circle. Fortunately, Xuefu experienced a cleansing, the population was simple, and the steward was quite discerning, so that people avoided it. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1311. But even so, after today, Xueqing's love of men spread throughout Beijing. After making a circle and going to his own yard, Xueqing put down his words and brought hot water made by herbs. Personally help Yanj remove socks and feet. Most of your noble girls' feet are beautiful and exquisite, their toes are as white as pearls, and the words of the song are no exception. But probably because of walking all morning, her feet were swollen and red. Can't walk, really didn't lie. Xueqing held her feet. Although she was expressionless, she tried her best to help her. Yan Ji looked at Xueqing squatting at her feet, her head slightly bowed down, and her gentle black hair was thick and smooth, reminding her of the green leaf she had once. She stretched out her hands and touched Xueqing's hair. She also pulled Xueqing's white jade crown off her head. Mo Fa suddenly poured down. Xueqing looked up and looked at Yanj with a little doubt. Yanj said quickly, I also bought you a wooden rafter, but I don't know if your hair can be used. If you carry it back, sit on a footstool, I will help you try it out. Xueqing. He turned silently and sat on the footstool. Yanj's wooden mule was originally bought by Emperor Suanwu, but at this moment, she was anxious and gave Muqing to Xueqing. I felt that this arrangement was reasonable. After all, Emperor Suanwu was always at the border, and the food and clothing were average. An ordinary wooden rafter could not shock him, but Xueqing was different. This man comes from everybody, and he has been eating and drinking very finely since he was a child. Such an ordinary wooden clog might really make him look good. Yanj will burst, but the host won't, so Yanj can only use his fingers as a comb to hold Xueqing's hair together. The man's hair was thick and long. Yanj got together a few times before embarrassingly fixing the hair with a wooden clog. Taking a closer look, she sighed, it's too ugly. After that, she would reach out and pull out the wooden clogs. Xueqing reached out and squeezed her wrist, I'll see. While talking, I got up and went to the dresser. The gentleman in the mirror is as smooth as a jade, and even a bird's nest can't grab the limelight of this handsome beauty. But this messy hair and the crooked hairpin that can't be dropped are indeed a little disgusting to look at. Yanj said with a smile, everything is ugly. You want to watch it? After reading it, how do you feel? Xueqing didn't look back, only looked at the little feet placed on the edge of the tub from the mirror, and asked softly, first burst. Yan Ji nodded, I haven't even brushed my own hair. Don't laugh at me anymore. I won't touch your hair in the future. It's pretty. He walked over and took a towel to bend over to help her wipe her feet. Yan Ji heard him say this, and her laughing body was trembling. Go out and walk around to see who will praise you for being good looking, open your eyes and talk nonsense. Xueqing bowed her head, took a bite of her tiny ruyu fingers, and slowly raised her palms along her feet, twitching, you do, everything looks good. Yan Ji stopped smiling, lying sideways with an arm on his back, and looked at Xueqing with a smile, a king and other women, is this the same? Xueqing got up and raised his hand, and took off the wooden clog on Yanj's head. He held Yanj in his arms and walked away, is Yang Yang jealous? After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1312. Yan Ji dangled Xueqing's neck and watched the bun on his head tremble every step, and then suddenly smiled and frowned. The little grin looks like a little fox. Hearing his lips, he immediately pouted, it's vinegar. Xueqing, Yang Yang will be jealous. If vinegar makes a Qing happy, I'll be happy. This kind of mindless love words, if you really come and talk with me, you can't finish a day or a night. Yan Ji grabbed a strand of his hair around his fingertips and stopped the words, "Aching, where are you taking me? A bauhinia tree in the backyard is blooming. Take you to see." Yanj heard the words, and hesitated for a moment. My mother loved the bauhinia tree most. Later, when her father died, she cut down all the bauhinia trees in the yard. Xueqing stepped forward. There are few bauhinia trees in Beijing. Xueqing originally wanted to show a strange song to Yan Ji, but she didn't expect it to be self-defeating. The atmosphere instantly dropped to freezing point. He turned and walked towards the room holding Yanj. Yanj hurriedly pulled his hair. "Go and see, why did you turn around again? I haven't seen the bauhinia tree for years." Under the bauhinia tree, there are couches and various pastry fruits. Several of the pastries were bought by Swag for Yanqing. When Xueqing was sitting there and eating a snack, Yan Ji lay on Xueqing's legs and looked at the bauhinia tree above his head. "Is it delicious?" Yan Ji asked Xueqing curiously. "I have tasted some of these. I think they taste good and bring them back. I don't know if you like it or not. I don't know what flavor you like." The words "bring back" of Yan Ji pleased Xueqing, and his eyebrows stretched, even though the sweetness in his mouth made him vomit, but his expression was very pleasant. "It's delicious." Yanj reached out, grabbed his hair and played with it. "I found that your hair is particularly hard and the black hair is very dense. There should be many people boasting about your hair." Although she didn't have much strength, from time to time, she still held his hair. He took a sip of tea and broke the taste in his mouth, before bowing his head. The sun dappled across her leaves and fell on her face. Her fair face was dark, and her gorgeous facial features added a little bit of magic. The red clothes were spread out to reflect the bauhinia, and she looked more like a flower demon. He leaned over and took her into his arms. "No one praises me." Yan Song did not respond. His lips kissed her gorgeous lips. Yan Ji tilted his head slightly, squinting his eyes, tangling his hair with his fingertips. "My father and my mother, two people agree with each other. At that time, it was still a story in the capital. I thought about it when I was young. When I grow up, I want to marry a man like my father. When Ajiu came to my house, he always played with me. At that time, I regarded him as my little follower. Later, Juju asked me how I could marry me. I told him that he had to fight like my father and be a general in order to marry me. Ajiu went to Bianguan, and later, my father died, my mother died, and I became an orphan. Aching, I always thought that I was also a little princess, but I only knew when I became an orphan girl. I am not a princess, but a plaything for others. I insist on being Emperor Ju because I think he can protect me. Aching, you can't protect me, your honoraries can't protect me, and I can't protect myself." In that position, with the exception of Ajiu, I was not at ease. "Aching, you and me, let's stop there. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1313. Ben Qing, who was still kissing Yan Ji's eyebrows, was stiff. But before he responded, Yanj continued to say, "I can't be a little princess now, and I don't want to be a plaything anymore. I think I might be a good queen mother." Her voice was soft and soft. Whispering is like whispering to his lover. He had previously felt itching physically and mentally and just wanted to hang around with her. But now, it looks like a pot of cold water. Cold downright. Plaything. She couldn't make it, and felt that in his eyes she was a plaything. He was so full of blood that he seemed to be angry. The hand clasping her waist tightened unknowingly. "He wants to speak. But I couldn't say a word. She pursed her lips and stared at her coldly. Yan Ji laughed lowly, and her voice was low, "Ching, wouldn't you? Then when would you be willing? When you marry your wife, or when I am old?" She clasped his neck with her hands, and laughed, but tears came from her eyes. She looked at him. In the watery eyes, there was a feeling of sadness and obsession. "Ching, let me go, okay? I haven't begged anyone, but when my mother was dying, I begged her not to leave me. Now, I beg you. Ching, let go of Yang Yang." Her delicate, soft arms hooked his neck, as if all his soul was caught. There seemed to be a heavy accumulation of water in his heart that made him breathless, but his throat was tight and no sound could be heard. He stared at her unflickeringly, watching her delicate lips open and close. After a long while, his throat rolled, and he said dumbly, "Okay. The last time," he said. He trembled his fingers to untie her lace. Fearing she refused, he lowered his head and blocked her lips. Fortunately, she did not refuse. The soft body seemed to trickle him. The mania in his heart was gradually healed, gradually sinking, forgetting tonight and tonight. Lips and teeth were tangled, and the clothes fell to the ground. The woman's groaning gradually became lower and higher, and gradually, it became an uncontrollable gasp. Most of the men who look ascetic and cold are basically very warm and brutal in bed. Schwetching is really cruel. Like a wolf, it doesn't give the song a bit of breathing room at all. Of course, it may also be because you felt that at the last moment you had to go back to sleep, so it was so intense. Under the bauhinia tree, the two men tossed till dusk. Yan Ji has fallen asleep and tired. Only Schwetching, holding Yanj in her arms, looked like a peerless treasure, slowly touching her body with her fingers, her eyes stunned. This song of sleep, sleep sweet black sweet. When she woke up, there was still a moment of blankness. But immediately, she remembered that she and Schwetching had an affair. Oh, it's not cheating, it's a deal. Yan Ji got up in a hurry. What time is it? She still has to go back to the palace? When he sat up, he found that Schwetching was still asleep. Why did this man sleep? Yan Ji reached out and pushed Schwetching. What about my clothes? She was naked, and there was no shadow of clothes in the room. Pushed by Yanj, Schwetching woke up. He sat up and looked at Yanj in amazement. Yan Ji glanced at him, and at the end, glanced again. Why did I sleep for a while, and felt that Schwetching had changed? After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 1314. It's not like it's changed. The facial features are still the facial features, but the eyes haven't sharpened before, and the temperament on the body seems to be very different from the former. At first glance, Schwetching's features are extremely melancholic and indifferent. It seems that from a gentle boy to a melancholy prince. But now is not the time to struggle with this. Yanj pushed him. What about my clothes? After a pause, he asked again, King, why do you have gray hair? It really has gray hair. Before going to bed, Schwetching's thick ufa gave her envy. But now, Schwetching's white hair from time to time in the forest is very conspicuous. Schwetching was silent. He turned over and pressed his words under him. Yanj pushed him. Don't make trouble, I have to go back to the palace. I said that the last shot was done, now how can I regret it? Moreover, Yan Ji looked at Schwetching Mei with apathy in her eyes, and it was not like a state of sexual desire to come to the morning cannon. The door was opened at this time. As soon as Yanj looked up, he saw Emperor Suanwu who came against the light. Even if he could not see the expression on Emperor Suanwu's face at first, he could still feel the gloomy murderousness on him. Words of song. Nima overturned again. She felt that her car skills needed to be retrained. As Emperor Suanwu entered the inner room, the light behind him became the background, and his face slowly emerged from the darkness. Real Suanwu Emperor. Probably because of the backlight, Emperor Suanwu looked much taller than before. Yan Song is a bit awkward. He doesn't even have clothes on. She wanted to drill into the bed, but felt it again. At this time, isn't it a self-deceit to drill a bed? So she could only drag the corner of the quilt poorly, and said to Emperor Suanwu, who approached slowly, "Ajiu, can you get me a dress first? I don't have any clothes to wear." Emperor Suanwu lags behind. He stared at Yan Ji, and those dark eyes seemed to be brewing a flame, which would erupt at any time and anywhere. Seeing that he didn't answer, Yan Ji turned to ask Xueqing, who was also silent, "Where is the clothes? It is too insecure to negotiate without clothes. It looks like bald people are seen by others, and it is embarrassing to think about it." The faces of Xueqing and Emperor Suanwu were very strange silences. They didn't even look at each other's love rivals, staring at the song without blinking. A lot of goosebumps on Yanj were staring at them. I always feel that these two men are boiling like tigers and beasts. Could it be that her naked skin is more seductive than her face, so she picked up the desire of these two men? If one shot can solve the rollover incident, Yanj really doesn't mind coming. Threesome is just threesome, she recognized. However, she felt that at this moment, although the two men looked at her strangely, they did not seem to be rushing for threesome. The atmosphere of silence seemed particularly tense. Yanj had to keep whispering, "I want to get dressed." "Emperor Suanwu, where are the clothes?" "Xueqing, the clothes are in the cabinet." Thank goodness, these two men finally have a gentleman's style. So, Yanj finally got his clothes. She was going to drill through the bed and listen to Emperor Suanwu saying to Xueqing, "Get out." This remark is not polite at all. Mention the words.